Welcome to the PreSnap Podcast presented by LineStar. All things daily fantasy football with a sprinkle of sports betting as well. Alongside Tyler Weeman, I'm Shannon Somerville. Super Bowl 57 is here. The Kansas City Chiefs taking on the Philadelphia Eagles in Arizona. Got quite the matchup set. We're going to go through your daily fantasy projections, including some sleeper picks and who to pay up for if you're playing DFS. It's also just great knowledge that you can impress all your friends with if you're at a Super Bowl party this weekend. If you're, just over at the Nacho Bowl and, need to show off some of your stats, this is the show for you. We've also got your anytime touchdown calls as well. I know a lot of you guys are placing a lot of prop bets, including anytime touchdowns are always a big category. So we'll tell you who we are picking this weekend in the Super Bowl. Tyler, let's kick things off, shall we? And we will start with a little quarterback comparison. Let's first start with Patrick Mahomes, the likely MVP for this season. Last week, willed his team to victory against the Bengals on a high ankle sprained ankle. So 326 passing yards. Yeah, no big deal for him at all. What do you see for him going up against the Eagles, though? A little bit tougher of a task as they rank number 1 in pass defense DVOA versus opposing teams.
Yeah, the Eagles have been excellent versus the quarterback all season long. However, they have not played a ton of really good quarterbacks. Mm-hmm. As we know, Mahomes is a really good quarterback. So I think he's going to do fine here. And the strength of this KC offense is going up the middle. They have good slot wide receivers. They have a tight end by the name of a guy, Travis Kelce. Mm-hmm. Maybe you have heard of him. And that's the weakness of this defense. So I think KC can just hammer the middle of the field, stay away from Bradbury.
Yeah.
And Slay and Mahomes will have plenty of success.
Well, the Philadelphia Eagles ranked 6th this season in terms of giving up fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Mm-hmm. You mentioned how they really haven't played very many great, drop back quarterbacks. In fact, they have only played 3 that rank in the top 10 in EPA per drop back. Week 1, Jared Goff. They almost lost that game to Jared Goff in the season opener. The next was week 4 against Trevor Lawrence, although we can kind of throw that game out. It was a rain game. Don't know if you remembered it. Trevor Lawrence fumbled it 4 times. But the next game where they faced a top 10 passer was Dak Prescott, and he actually beat them. Granted, Jalen Hurts was not in that game where he played. However, he put up 40 points against the Eagles in that game. So that being said, you shouldn't be scared away from the Eagles defense in this position.
And that Trevor Lawrence game was before Trevor Lawrence really came around and was playing really, really well.
On the other side of things, we've got a pretty incredible quarterback in Jalen Hurts, who's had a monster season, certainly made a case for himself for MVP and was in the thick of it until he got hurt late in the season with a shoulder injury, averaging 240 passing yards per game this season. However, in the playoffs, he hasn't quite looked himself. And granted, he hasn't had to do very much with the run game pretty much basically getting them a trip to the Super Bowl in this. What do you forecast for him going up against this Chiefs defense that has struggled a bit if you're looking anywhere, the secondary particularly?
Yeah, all season long we've been picking on the Chiefs secondary. Several quarterbacks have had their best games of the year versus KC. So I think Hurts is in a great spot. They can get aggressive. The other thing with Hurts is all season long, this Eagles team hasn't really had to play that second half. They will have to play this second half. So I like Hurts. I think he's going to be rushing a lot. And KC is ranked 28th in the league, allowing 1.6 touchdowns per game.
You had him for
passing touchdowns.
One of your prop bets was him over his rushing total. Yes. And in fact, a lot of people are saying maybe he will even break the Super Bowl record for rushing yards for a quarterback. Steve McNair holds that for the most rush yards by a quarterback with 64, something that he has done this season. Granted, not since he's been back from getting hurt. He does have 138 passing yards per game in the playoffs, which is actually the fewest of any playoff quarterback.
That's crazy.
Yeah, but he still rushes the ball, and he's rushed for a touchdown in each game. So he makes up for his point total in the rushing end.
He absolutely does, but it also goes back to the fact that they haven't had to do anything in the playoffs. They haven't faced anybody.
But they faced a really good defense in the 49ers, though.
Yes, but they didn't have a quarterback going against them.
Yeah.
So they didn't really need to put up points.
Now he does, and he's going to have to target them, especially against a defense that gave Joe Burrow some problems.
Absolutely.
All right, let's go to some players that we're going to want to shell out some cash for if you're playing daily fantasy. And no surprise here, the first player we're going to be talking about is tight end Travis Kelce, who is a playoffs monster. He's averaging 80 receiving yards per game this season. Last 8 playoff games since 2020, he's averaging 104 receiving yards per game. Just takes it to a whole nother level. Incredible Hulk style. Going up against Philadelphia, great defense. They do rank 14th, though, in pass defense DVOA versus opposing tight ends. So kind of middle of the road there, actually. What do you see for Kelce in this game?
I think the weakness of this defense is through the middle. Kelce is their best option. And if you look over to the prop market, highest receiving total, Travis Kelce. Best anytime touchdown odds, Travis Kelce. Sportsbooks thinks Travis Kelce is the one that's most likely to do damage, and I have to agree with that.
And a big factor in that, too, is the fact that no more Cheetah on that team to throw to. The wide receivers are a little bit banged up, too, from the last game. They had only one wide receiver that was a starter by the end of the game because 3 of them left the game with injuries. Kadarius Toney, Mecole Hardman, who is still out for this particular game. So Juju Smith-Schuster was out. He will be back in this game. However, when you're looking for somebody reliable, you know it's got to be Travis Kelce. He's a scoring machine. And for fantasy purposes, worth the money that he will definitely cost you. Next up, wide receiver A.J. Brown is also a pretty good bet. Tyler, all season long, we have been cashing in on wide receiver ones going against the Kansas City Chiefs secondary because they ranked 31st in pass defense DVOA versus opposing teams' wide receiver one. Week after week, WR1s crushing their respective overs on their receiving yards. Now, A.J. Brown, just 50 yards for him in the playoffs. He's been a little bit quiet. However, this is a guy who's 4th in the NFL in receiving yards during the regular season. Have to think that Hurts is going to get him involved in this game.
Yes, and to your point, the 50 yards, Hurts hasn't had to throw the ball. They haven't had to really rely on A.J. Brown. This game's a different game. KC, we've been picking on them all season long. Should be no different here. A.J. Brown is on the top for the matchup tool. He is the number 1 matchup for wide receivers, and I really like him this week. I think it's his game.
Another wide receiver we're looking at is his counterpart, Devonte Smith, who has been a big target for Jalen Hurts. And in fact, over the last 6 games or so, his numbers are actually pretty comparable to A.J. Brown's. In fact, Devonte Smith seems to be the guy that Jalen Hurts, when he needs some yards, he's going to Devonte Smith. Granted, the last game, he came down with a catch that maybe should have been ruled back, so he's been the recipient of a little bit of luck in that department. However, 97 receiving yards in the playoffs is pretty good, especially when you consider your point you just made. They haven't had to use the passing game a whole lot. What do you see for him, though, against this Kansas City defense?
See, this is an interesting thing here because Devonta Smith isn't a true WR2.
Right.
He's more like a WR1B to A.J. Brown's 1A. He's in a good spot. Either one of these guys can go nuts. Smith has actually out-targeted A.J. Brown through the end of the season here. Through the last 4 games, Smith has 8.5 targets a game, A.J. Brown 8.3. Just goes to talk about how this guy really is a wide receiver 1. He has A.J. Brown on the other side.
And to your point, the last team that they faced, the Bengals, guess who was the lead receiver in that game? It was T. Higgins. Also a situation of maybe a wide receiver 1B in that situation. So he was the lead receiver in that game, 83 yards, and he had a touchdown as well. So it'll be interesting to see how things shake out between those two, because where the Bengals struggled was that offensive line couldn't give Joe Burrow time. But the Jalen Hurts is going to have a lot of time back there to get it to his receivers. So I think that might be the difference in this game.
It's kind of interesting. So the strength of this Chiefs team is through the middle.
Yeah.
Whereas the strength for the Eagles defense is on the outsides.
All right.
So it's kind of interesting.
So shell out the cash for those guys. We got Devonte Smith, A.J. Brown and Travis Kelce. Got to get him in those lineups somewhere. Next, we're going to go to some sleeper plays, all right? These guys you're going to scrape bottom of the barrel, but they could potentially come up big for you if you're playing in some of these big contests where, Tyler, let's be honest, you got to find a little bit of leverage somewhere. Yeah. These are only 2 teams, so you got to try to find ways to stand out, right?
There is 470,000 people in the DraftKings tournament, the big one. So you're going to need to get a little different. You're going to need the perfect lineup, and random touchdowns happen in single games. And that's really what you're looking for with these picks.
Especially when you're looking at the Chiefs, and Patrick Mahomes has distributed the ball to a lot of different wide receivers and running backs included as well. And a running back that is back into the fold, Clyde EdwardsHelaire, activated off the IR. He had been out dealing with an ankle sprain. Now he is back. In his time during the season, he was averaging 45 total yards per game. Although the big thing for him was he was scoring a lot of touchdowns. He had 6 touchdowns when he was playing. Going up against a rush defense for the Eagles, that's their weakness, is the rush defense. They ranked 21st in the regular season in rush defense DVOA. When you look at Clyde EdwardsHelaire from a fantasy perspective, what do you forecast for him?
The situation here is that we have no idea how the Chiefs are going to use him. He's extremely cheap and going unowned. There is absolutely a world where KC just puts him back and maybe takes the McKinnon role, or, just gets 20% of touches, but breaks one to get a touchdown. So I think CEH is one you should consider.
Yeah, I mean, right now it's the Isaiah Pacheco show. He's kind of stolen the show. However, now that Clyde EdwardsHelaire is back, how will he fit in? Yeah. And if he does take some of those carries, it could be really profitable for you from a daily fantasy.
And it was the CEH show before he got hurt. That's the real point there.
All right, next up, a wide receiver for the Chiefs, Sky Moore. Just 13 yards versus Cincinnati. Hasn't really played a big role in the offense for Kansas City. What are you expecting from him here? What's his potential?
Now, he is an electric rookie. They have tried to get him the ball in spots here, but it's the situation here. Juju's been banged up. He left last game hurt. Hardman is out. Tony is always hurt. So this wide receiver core is going to need somebody to step up. He is an electric rookie. He can make something happen. He can make a big play. And you're really, just hoping.
Okay, and then in that same vein, Justin Watson, also another wide receiver, super, super cheap on FanDuel and DraftKings, averaging less than 2 targets per game, though. Is this another case of injuries to the wide receivers?
It is, but Watson actually has been playing a lot, and his ADOT is like 20 yards down the field. So say he catches one ball for 40 yards, it goes for a touchdown, he's going to be in the perfect lineup.
Yeah.
So I think he's one to consider. He's been out there a lot. And again, extremely cheap, very low owned.
Another name we've actually seen popping up a little bit towards the end of the season was tight end Noah Gray. He's averaging 17 receiving yards per game. I mean, it's the Travis Kelce show, but Noah Gray's also been in there with some catches here and there.
Look, tight ends are used in the red zone. He does get a couple plays drawn for him. If one of those goes for a touchdown, it's another one where he could be in the optimal lineup pretty easy.
Kadarius Toney, you mentioned he's been dealing with some injuries, ankle and hamstring. He's been limited a little bit in practice going into this game. What is his fantasy outlook for the Super Bowl?
So they're saying he's totally healthy. He has been running around in practice just fine. Last game, they were looking at him early and kept trying to get him the ball in space. So I think you got to consider Toney. Yes, it is likely he gets hurt. But, hey, if he doesn't, he could break the game.
Let's flip to the Eagles, and we'll start off with running back Kenneth Gainwell, who's been quite the stud in the playoffs. He had 48 rushing yards versus the 49ers, one of the top rushing defenses in the league, and then he had 112 against the Giants. What do you see for him this week going up against Kansas City?
So Miles Sanders has not been used in the passing game. They pretty much forgot about him there. Kenneth Gainwell is the passing down back. If Chiefs get ahead, Gainwell could be used a little bit more, get a couple extra receptions, and we know he can break a big play.
I mean, if he puts up 48 against a defense that ranks second in rush defense DVOA, the Kansas City Chiefs rank 14th in that category. He could absolutely have a big game there as well. Another running back to maybe consider is Boston Scott. He averages 18 rush yards per game. Yeah, that's not really eye-popping, but he's had 4 touchdowns each of the last 5 games. That'll get my attention every time in DFS. What do you see for Boston Scott?
Look, Boston Scott is a really good runner. He has a nose for the end zone, but he is likely only going to be used in an Eagles blowout. So one thing to kind of consider when you're building these lineups, if you're building them by hand, is you want to make a story with your lineup. One, Boston Scott is a perfect one in a blowout for the Eagles.
All right. Next up, Quez Watkins, averaging 20 receiving yards per game. He has no catches in the playoffs. However, we have seen him come up with some big receptions throughout the season.
Yeah, I mean, simply put, he's just the 4th option on the Eagles pass catchers. You got to kind of consider them in these games. So, Quez, step up.
We got to consider some people. I mean, there's only 2 teams to choose from.
Absolutely.
When you're playing in these big tournaments, it's like you got to take some gambles here and there on these guys.
And when you're playing for one single game, projections go out the window a little bit. Obviously, it's still important, but you got to kind of think of the game script and think of the outlier things that could happen. Quez Watkins' touchdown is one of them.
I like that little analogy. You got to write the story. It's like a choose your own adventure.
It is.
Do you ever do those as a kid?
I did. Yeah.
Choose your own adventure daily fantasy. All right, now it is time for our touchdown calls of the game. Super Bowl Sunday is here, so are our touchdown calls. Tyler, where are you headed for an anytime touchdown in Super Bowl 57?
I got to go to the man, 6'5", 250, Travis Kelce, minus 125 for a touchdown. He's the primary option on this offense. Philadelphia's weakness is through the middle. He has 15 total touchdowns on the year. That is including 3 in the 2 playoff games.
He's been a fantasy monster. Really going out on a limb there, Tyler.
Super limb. Way out there.
I'm going with Eagles wide receiver Devonte Smith because I like a little juice on my anytime touchdown call, plus 160 in the sports books. Smith has 8 touchdowns on the year. That includes 1 in the playoffs. 5 touchdowns versus man defense. Why is that important? Well, the Chiefs play man defense at the 8th highest rate. Furthermore, Devonte Smith lines up on the right side. Conveniently, the Chiefs have a pass defense DVOA grade on that side that ranks 26, as opposed to 6 on the opposite side where Brown lines up. So Devonte Smith's in an excellent position, especially when you consider wide receiver 2s have done pretty well, including last game T. Higgins had a touchdown as well for the Bengals. Let's get it. Devonte Smith.
Odds for 2 touchdowns for him are pretty nice too.
All right. Yeah. Little double touchdown.
Well, what we've seen with these Philly receivers is when one guy wins, he really wins. We've seen A.J. Brown have a couple multi-touchdown games. We've seen Smith do it too.
The more I go through this analysis with you on our different shows, the more I'm like, are the Eagles really going to – I think I had the Chiefs. Now I'm like, oh, the Eagles are going to be tough. With these wide receivers, it's going to be hard to stop.
They have been the most complete team all season long.
Who are you going with in Super Bowl 57? Put me on the spot here.
Put me on the spot.
Yeah,
I'm going to go KC.
You're going KC. Yeah. The experience matters in these situations. And when you're looking at KC, they got a lot of it. Patrick Mahomes, this is his 3rd trip. And Andy Reid, his 4th trip as a head coach. So that makes a difference in these games. And although the talent level, Jalen Hurts, guys, that pass rush of the Eagles is pretty good.
I do think that the Eagles have more talent on their roster. I just don't know.
I think it's going to be a great game either way. I'm really excited for it. So, and who's not excited for the halftime show? I know Tyler's been like, all he wants is like, I just want to watch the halftime show, right? I'm joking. All right, make sure you stay tuned. Speaking of halftime show, for our fun prop bets show, where we will go over the ridiculous props that people are actually putting money on, including things like what the song will be at the Super Bowl halftime, what color Rihanna's first outfit will be, all the things you didn't know that you needed to know that you have to know. That's basically it. All right, that's going to do it.
Tongue twister.
for our Super Bowl 57 DFS show. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments. And as always, make sure to check out LineStarApp.com to help you dominate daily fantasy with our lineup optimizer and all the tools at your disposal. Check it out. And we'll see you guys next time. Enjoy the game. Good luck in all your betting endeavors. We'll see you next time.
Have a good one. Bye.